Hi everyone. I can see that we've got a few people that have just arrived. So we are due to start in a minute. I am going to give it another minute or so, just in case we have some other people arriving today, because it has just turned 12. Um, while people are letting themselves into the meeting, I will just do a few housekeeping things before we make a start. So my name is Jodie Boyd, and I'm joined today by my colleague Sue, who's just give a little wave, and we'll do some formal introductions when we get started. A couple of things just to bear in mind. So the session is being recorded, so people can catch up and watch it if they've not been able to attend live with us today. You will notice that we have disabled everybody's cameras and mics. That is just to allow us to make sure that this webinar runs with minimal interruptions. You do have access to the chat, and we'd really encourage you to use that chat function. So it'd be great if people could introduce themselves and say, give us their name and where they're joining us from. But also, if you have any questions as we're running through afternoon now, as we're running through this session this afternoon, pop them in the chat. We've got some people keeping an eye on the chat for as well. Myself and Sue are talking, but we will also be looking as well. And if it makes sense for us to address your question there, and then we will do. There will be opportunities for you to ask questions at the end as well, but like I say, you can join us in joining in. We like this to be as interactive as possible. The only thing we would say is, if you are introducing yourself in the chat, is if you could please not put any identifying information, so no phone numbers and no email addresses, because obviously this is being recorded and it's a public forum as well. So I'm just going to open the chat so that I can see, because I can see some people saying hi already. So hi Paul, hi Davinia, nice to see you here today. So the way this session will work is we have a PowerPoint presentation, but we don't want it to be us just talking at you, so we will try and make it as informal as possible. But yes, please do join in with us via the chat. So I am just going to share my screen, so just give me a second for that to work. And it's great to see everybody introducing themselves. So thank you very much. There we go. So the purpose of today's session, as you're aware, is we are going to talk about our postgraduate qualifications in career development, the qualifications that we offer here at the University of Huddersfield. We are specifically focusing on the distance learning version of the course today. But what we will say is that we do offer a blended version of the course where people can attend in person in Huddersfield, and the courses are identical, and we'll talk more about the course structure as we work through this session. But if you are thinking that you want to come and join us in person rather than the distance learning, the modules and the structure of the course is exactly the same. The only thing that differs is obviously the mode of delivery, and the in-person course involves you having lectures in Huddersfield, where with the distance learning programme, everything is obviously delivered online. Some of you might be familiar with the University of Huddersfield, or this might be your first time having anything to do with us, but we have been offering courses in career development for over 45 years. So we are really experienced as a university and as a team in delivering qualifications in career development. In fact, both myself and Sue did our qualifications here at Huddersfield. So we're really familiar with actually going through this particular qualifications. We will talk about the course structure, and I know people always have lots of questions around placements and professional practice, and Sue is going to talk in detail about that later. But if you do have any particular questions about placements and things, you can pop them in the chat. So and we're keeping an eye on that as we move through. So I just want to introduce us as a team before we get started. So as I said at the beginning, my name is Jodie Boyd and I'm the course leader for the MA PG DIP in Career Development and Employability here at the university. I did this qualification myself and qualified as a careers advisor in 2004. I worked as a careers advisor in schools in West Yorkshire before moving into roles at universities which focused more on widening participation and social mobility before taking over as course leader in 2017. And Sue, I'll let you introduce yourself rather than me do that for you.
Thank you, Jodie. So I'm the newest member of the team. I realised it's nearly 3 years that I've been teaching on the programme. I know, time flies, doesn't it? So yeah, as I say, newest on the team. I completed my PG DIP in 2018. But within that time, I'd already been working within a sort of like a setting in the community, supporting people to make decisions about their life and their career and what they wanted to do, etc. So it was a really sensible step for me to actually get the qualification. And since then, I've worked in schools, colleges, universities, a range of different roles within university. And yeah, really happy to be teaching on the course. And I look after the practice side of the course, looking after those practice modules where hopefully you'll be developing the skills and the knowledge to be able to actually take on the role of a career development practitioner.
Thanks, Sue. And we have another member of our team, Bob Gilworth, who's not with us today. He's actually in Australia at a conference, presenting at a conference in Australia. Bob is our higher education expert. So Bob runs our higher education focused modules. So if any of you are looking to qualify as a guidance practitioner working in higher education, then you would be undertaking the modules that Bob has developed and that Bob leads on. I focus on the theory modules, so I deliver theories of occupational choice, so looking at theories that explain how we make career related decisions. And I also look after the organisational culture module, which is more about that bigger picture of what do guidance professionals do, where do we do it, and what challenges do we face, which kind of a couple of slides before we start looking at the course in detail, which is looking at what do careers professionals do. Now, looking at the people who are introducing themselves in the chat and seeing the list of people who'd signed up, and we understand that lots of you are already very experienced in working in career development. And I think the purpose of us just including this a little bit is to talk about how the role is really multifaceted. It can vary hugely depending on whether you choose to work in schools, colleges, university, in the community for careers organisation. And there is, you know, it's a role that is constantly evolving and changing. I mean, certainly for me, the role of a careers advisor that I did in 2004 looks very, very different to the role that our graduates are going out and doing. And I'm pretty sure you would agree with that, Sue, looking at what people do and the type of roles they do.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many different roles that could be taken on by career development practitioner. Really grown.
Yeah, and what we have done as a course team, and I've just moved on the slide there just to a few points there around the role of a careers guidance practitioner. And the course itself is designed to support people who want to work in a wide range of settings. So if you're sat there thinking, well, I'm really interested in working in schools and colleges, or like I've mentioned, HE already, or even we get people working in international schools, or we get people working out in the community, working for organisations. The course is designed for you to tailor it to your particular career interests within that career development sector. We have modules designed to focus on particular aspects, but actually a lot of your assignments, and we can talk about this and people can ask questions, a lot of the content and the assignments are really around the professional practice that you have access to. So whether that be an employer or where you are working or where you have some time on placements. Which leads us on to talk a little bit about course structure, because this is what people really want to know about. So the course is designed to run over a 12-month period if you do that for full-time, and over 2 years if you are part-time. The course is run on what we call a carousel model. And what this means is we have multiple start dates on this program. So our next start date is January, but then we have another start date in May. And the way the course is structured is that we are teaching these modules during these terms, and the students who are joining us will join at whatever point we are in that particular 12-month cycle. And I realise that can sound quite confusing, but don't worry, we navigate you and guide you through that. So we've split these modules into 3 terms. So we have term 1, which is what we are referring to is between January and April. So if you are looking at joining us in January 2025, your term 1 modules would be understanding the labour market, one of your optional modules, which we will talk about in a second. And if you are opting to do the MA, then you would be doing your research methodology module then. So there's a good point to just explain that we do offer the MA and we offer the PG dip. And depending on your particular circumstances, it will, will depend which is the right course for you. So the MA is if you are based in the UK, is eligible for a postgraduate loan. So often students will opt to do the MA because that is how they are choosing to fund it. If you are either not eligible for a postgraduate loan or lucky enough to maybe have an employer paying for you, which we do have some students who come on the course and are paid for by their employer, students may opt to do the PG dip. And I think the really important thing to mention is that all of our students are taught together. So we teach our MA and our PG dip students together. The only difference is if you are on the MA, you are going to be undertaking the research methodology module and the independent research project module with your fellow MA students. If you are enrolling on the PG dip, you don't do those 2 modules. And that's really the most simplest way of thinking about it. We also offer a full-time and a part-time version of the course. If you are doing the full-time version, you will complete all of those modules on the screen in 1 year. If you are going to opt for the part-time option, you can see they are listed whether they are year 1 or year 2 modules. So what that means is that you will be mixing as a group with full-time and part-time students, with people who are on the PG dip and people who are on the MA. And that's really good because it means that you build your professional network, and it means that you are in modules with lots of other people and being able to work together as a group. Is there anything I've missed there, Sue, that you think is really useful for people to know about in terms of that course structure before we go through the modules a bit more?
I think you've covered it really well. That thing about joining people who, if you join in January, you'll be joining a group of people who are doing the same module that started in the May previously. So, you're getting to know loads of people. And then obviously, as you go through, if you're a January starter, you'll have some people that started last May will be finishing, and then you'll have new people joining you who start in the following May. So it's a really fabulous way of continuing to keep that group of students really fresh and invigorating in that sense, but also, like you say, about building their professional networks and peer support. Some long-term friendships come out of these groups, don't they?
Absolutely. And that I was just going to say about that peer support is really important, because one of the benefits of the carousel model is that we have you're joining students who are already partway through the program, and they're really good at then supporting you in engaging in that program, and sometimes understanding some of the practical things around, oh, well, how does this work on the VLE, and how does this actually, so having that peer-to-peer support, particularly for a distance learning program, I think is really important. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love to see happen, is that we deliver our live teaching sessions and we see you all as a group, but we see these relationships and networks building as they move through the course, and that's really nice to see. And then we see it all on LinkedIn when everybody stays good friends and then comes to graduation as one big group. Yeah. And I have just seen a question. I know that Megan has responded to it in the chat, but the MA and the PG dip, we have multiple start dates for both of those programs, and our next start date is January, and then we have a May start date as well for both the MA and the PG dip, and both the full and part-time options. It's structured in a way that we can offer all options at all start dates.
Yeah, so I think it's probably, I was just going to say, it's probably just worth mentioning there, so that if you are a May starter, your research methodology would start in the May, and then the independent research project would start September through to the end of your course or end of your year. So yeah, that will shift, but all the others are taught in those particular terms, but that one does shift a little bit dependent on your start
date. And we can let that one shift because those two modules are structured slightly differently to our other modules, aren't they, in terms of with the independent research project and the research methodology, there's far more focus on that independent learning, because what you are doing is essentially developing your own research project alongside supervision with a member of staff. So instead of having a huge amount of taught sessions with other people, the taught sessions, there are some taught sessions, but the vast majority of contact is that one-to-one contact with your supervisor. So that's why we can allow that to shift. We've also been very mindful that people undertaking this qualification are also often working alongside doing this. Sometimes in a careers related role, sometimes they're doing part-time work to fund the qualification, but they're also undertaking placement activity. So we've been very mindful to ensure that the workload is evenly distributed as we possibly can make it. There are always going to be pinch points where there's a lot going on, and we try and make sure students are aware of when they might be, so that you can plan in advance. And we've also been very mindful with assessment deadlines, so that we try our utmost to make sure that we're not giving you lots of assessment deadlines at the same time, because that obviously makes life a little bit stressful. So in terms of these particular modules, so I'll give you a little bit of information on these modules, so that just to give you a little bit of context in terms of how that content is just distributed and what it is that you are covering. So understanding the labour market, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So we are looking at the labour market, understanding how we might use data and labour market information to inform our roles. So it is very, very data focused, but how we use that data in a practical way. So there's not an expectation that you are generating your own data. It's about how understanding what data is out there and how do we use that as guidance professionals. We will come to the optional modules on another slide. I don't know if you want to talk about your two modules there, and your research project modules at this point, Sue.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So one of the modules that I look after is the Effective Careers Conversations modules, which is really, it's one of two of your skills-based modules. So the other one would be Facilitating Careers Working Groups. So the Effective Careers Conversation, all about those one-to-one skills, so you can undertake one-to-one guidance, career guidance interactions with individuals. And hopefully you'll be developing not just the skills needed, but also the knowledge and the underpinning frameworks and processes to have effective career conversations. And then kind of similarly, really, with the Facilitating Career Working Groups, we're looking at careers working groups, as it says on the tin, really. But we're looking at those different techniques that you might use, the different types of group works that you might use within your practice, and also, again, thinking about some of that theory that underpins it. So thinking about the theory around learning and how people learn, and how we engage people effectively. So those are sort of like two of the skills modules that I look after. I think really you've probably already covered a lot around both the research methodology and the independent research project. Like you say, they both come together to form what is essentially a master's level dissertation. So there's not an awful lot extra to say about that one, I don't think, at this point.
Now, I know some students, from my experience of being involved in this course and being involved in the dissertations is that some students do come onto the course with a really clear idea as to what research they want to do right at the outset. They're going, when it comes to the dissertation, this is what I'm looking at. Whereas we have other students who genuinely like, I've absolutely no idea what I want to research, and that's okay. What we tend to find is that you will develop ideas around what you're really passionate about as you move through the course. There will be certain subjects that just spark something in you that think, I want to look at that in a little bit more detail. And if there isn't, we can support you in saying, well, let's have a look at, what is it you're wanting to do? What do you currently do? And is there anything there that we can work with? So that's a little bit of reassurance. Going on questions I've been asked when I speak to potential students is sometimes students will come to me and say, the dissertation worries me a little bit because I'm not quite sure what it is that I would research. That's part of your research methodology module, is kind of scoping some of those ideas. So I have mentioned as well that the theories module and the organisational culture module, these are what I refer to as those bigger picture modules. As I said earlier, we're looking at, rather than your personal individual professional practice, we're looking more at the sector, so we're looking more outwards. So the theories of career decision making is understanding the various theories that attempt to explain how people make career decisions, of what barriers people might face, and what challenges people might face, and understanding how we might use that in our professional practice, but more so looking at the various theories and how they impact on a societal level. I particularly really like that module because of my widening participation background. So trying to understand things around, why do certain groups behave in particular ways, and trying to use career theory to explain some of that. And organisational culture is always a really interesting module to be part of, because we're looking at the guidance sector, we're looking at what people do and where they do it, but we're also starting to look at ethical practice and equality and diversity, and how we can ensure that we are practicing ethically within our organisations, and looking at what challenges there might be there. So those are the two modules that I particularly lead on. And I do, we did say we've got our 3 optional modules. So students will choose one of these modules to undertake. And again, it is helpful if you kind of, as you're applying, if you're thinking which pathway it is that you're interested in. But again, if you're unsure, you can always speak to us before you apply, or even after you've applied. And we do spend some time during induction week talking through these options with students to ensure that they are picking the one that's right for them. But something that's really important to point out, that in terms of accessing jobs in the career guidance sector, your career prospects are not harmed by your optional choice. So you can see here that we've got 3 optional modules. We've got employer engagement, entrepreneurship and business support, higher education in context, and leadership and management in career education. What they broadly do is create a pathway. So it means that, if you choose to study higher education in context, that module is really focused on the role of a careers consultant in a university. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to go and work in employer engagement or work in a school or college. And we do see students who pick a particular optional module but actually go and work in a different sector. That's absolutely fine, because the course does cover all of it. So if you choose the higher education module, you are still going to leave the course with a clear understanding of how careers guidance and careers education works in schools and colleges. And what these modules allow you to do, it is to go into an employer and say, I have studied a specialist module in this particular subject, and that can be a benefit for some people, but it's certainly not going to harm your career in any way. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the leadership and management module, Sue.
Yeah, I think one of the things that all 3 of these modules have in common is that they're all supporting you as students to develop the skills and knowledge so that you can take a strategic lead either in a higher education context or a school and colleges context or in an employer engagement context. So one of those modules that I look after is the leadership and management and career education, which is a schools and colleges focused module. But like the other modules there, it's very much around, thinking about how you can take the strategic lead. What do you need to know? What looking at the statutory guidance that's in place, look at the policy that's there and how you can use that and work within that to be effective in leading on a career education program within a school or college environment. So I think that's a real strand of commonality against all three, which is why they're also transferable. So if you did do the leadership and management, which is schools and college focused, there will still be leadership and management elements that are relevant in other areas as well. So as a student, when you finish the course or as a graduate of the course, it's up to you how you sell that to your employers or your future employers through your interviews.
Perfect. And that actually leads to the question that Paul's asked in the chat, which is, does this qualification allow you to work as in an international school setting as a career guidance counsellor? Yes, it is a simple and easy answer to that. But yeah, and we do have students on the programme at the moment who are working in international schools or have worked in international schools. This course is internationally recognised, and as Sue was saying, the skills you are developing and the knowledge that you're developing is transferable to a wide range of settings. So we do, like the leadership and management module, we do refer to as our schools and colleges module, but actually we've had people on that module go and work in higher education, go and work for private companies, and vice versa as well. So the easy answer to that, Paul, was yes, but to qualify that with we are helping you develop the skills that are beneficial across a wide range of settings.
I was going to say, it's really great actually having students who are from different countries and different settings, because even within just the UK, there's different settings, like some people working in international schools within the UK, independent schools within the UK, state sector schools, special schools, that there's so many different settings and there's so much variety. And in some ways, it doesn't matter what the setting is. There's lots to learn from all these different settings. But thinking about, well, what makes a good career education program within any of these settings? That's the foundation that you're going to be getting from these modules, is and how to interpret the data and use that effectively within whatever setting that you're in. So yeah, does the qualification allow you to work in international school setting? Absolutely. But you'll also be able to learn from others in different settings, different countries, to figure out what is best practice and how you can potentially use that in your own setting as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is such a benefit to the course and the students to have people on the course from different countries, but you said different settings, because we learn things, and it's really fascinating to have these discussions. And this is the thing I kind of alluded to earlier, is it actually almost doesn't matter what setting you're either working in or you're having your placement, because the assignments are designed to either be reflecting on your individual professional practice in whatever setting that might be, or, for example, the organisational culture assessment is asking you to talk about a chosen organisation. As long as that organisation offers some sort of career guidance service, whether that be in a school, a university, an organisation, a private organisation, it doesn't matter. Because as Sue said, what you're looking at is, well, what makes good career guidance? What does that look like? And what would that look like in this particular organisation? It makes marking those types of assignments fascinating, because every single one is different. And, writing about, you're reading about 20 different organisations and how they approach their career guidance. But it also, in the talk sessions, it's really fascinating to hear from all these different people and the different challenges that people have. But actually, what always strikes me, and I do quite a lot of work with international schools, Paul, and I've recently attended the Council for International Schools conference. And the thing that always strikes me when I attend these events is how many of the challenges are common. And it does not matter what organisation and what country you are working in. the issues that somebody in a school, a state school in England is facing are often very similar to somebody who is in a private international school in, like yourself, China, or as we've got somebody on the course at the minute from Malaysia. And I think that's always strikes me as particularly interesting. It would be quite useful before we move on to talk about professional practice to just talk about how the course is delivered. So, as I mentioned, we're particularly focusing on the distance learning program today. And some people interpret distance learning to mean that everything will be at a distance. You will never see or speak to us, and it will just be a case of you working through information online. But that's not the case with this program. This program, even though it is a distance learning program and you don't have to come to Huddersfield, everything is delivered online, but there is quite a lot of a live element to the program. So every module does have live teaching sessions timetabled in. We are mindful of time differences when we have international students. So we do have a conversation with you and see whether that will work. So far, everything's worked okay. I mean, we've had some students who are joining us and it is getting a little bit late in their country, but it has worked, and it has worked relatively well. So, just as well to point out that we do record absolutely everything. So, we do encourage attendance at those live sessions because they are really valuable in enabling you to talk to us, letting us talk to you, but also to just listening to your fellow students. But we also understand the challenges sometimes of attending all those live sessions. So they are recorded. The recordings are shared immediately so that you can catch up quite easily. Is there anything that you want to add there, Sue, that I might have missed?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Rather than distance learning, I guess remote learning kind of sums it up as it is a little bit different. It's definitely not all just left to your own devices, but that's been one of the biggest pieces of positive feedback that we've had about the course and the way that we've structured it, that students really enjoy coming together and having the opportunity to talk through some of the ideas and concepts and maybe the articles that we've shared in between sessions, so that they can make sense of it. So, as much engagement with that as possible, will really enhance your learning experience, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right about that feedback. We have had students who have expressed concerns at the start of a course saying, I want to do, one of the things about doing a course like this is meeting other people and sharing ideas and debating ideas, and slightly concerned about how that will work in a remote setting. But then, a few weeks into the course have contacted us to say, this is exactly what I was expecting. This is what I wanted. We are enabling students to debate, to talk. We use the functionality of Teams in terms of breakout rooms and discussions, and that's why we encourage that attendance at those live sessions.
Yeah,
but we do record it as well.
I was going to say the other thing that we're implementing from January onwards, just as a trial for this next 12 months, but this came directly from students in the Facilitating Careers Working Groups module. Actually, we were discussing about how we develop online communities when we are developing careers programs in an online environment, which is, lots of similarities to what we're doing here. But one of the things that came out of that conversation was how students felt it was really helpful to have time either at the beginning of a session or at the end of a session, or maybe just some time that's not associated to a module, that's just a bit of a free-for-all chat. So what we've implemented going forward is 2 strategies. The first is that we're inviting students to just join the session half an hour earlier, and the tutors aren't going to join the call at that point at all, but it's an opportunity for you as students to get a little bit of that day-to-day stuff off your chest, like, oh, I've had a terrible morning, or whatever it might be, or the cat's been sick on the floor, whatever it is. Get that stuff out of your system, but also get to know your peers on a far more social level. So that's the one thing that we're offering, so students can come early or stay a bit later, and there's not going to be any tutors hovering in and listening to your conversation. We'll just join when the session's due to start. And that's trying to emulate that sense of, if you were coming onto campus, you'd probably be waiting outside the classroom for a few minutes or waiting for the lecturer to arrive, or you might arrive a little bit early to make sure you're on time. And you'd have those conversations, you'd have a bit of a chat, and they're so valuable in terms of your learning and, realizing that, not everybody gets it, or, you've got similar questions and you can feel more confident to ask them in the session. So that was what we were trying to emulate there. And then the other thing that we're implementing is a sort of like a lunchtime, sort of like chew it over really. So these will be sessions that are facilitated by one of the team. And we will pick a topic and students will, share ideas about what topics they want to cover, but they're not specifically related to any one module. And what they give us the opportunity to do is help you to connect learning from each of your modules. So you might have done understanding the labour market in one of your first terms, maybe in your first year, and now you're in maybe your second year because you're doing it part-time and it was a year ago, and you're doing a different module and you're thinking, there's connections there. This gives you an opportunity to think about how the learning from all the different modules connect. So that's the other thing that we've implemented for this next year, and we're going to see what the student feedback is, see what the engagement's like, as to whether we carry on with that into our next year as well.
And that I'm really excited to see how that pans out. And that's something that we do. We speak to students, we get feedback from students, we act on it. We want this to be a really positive learning experience for all of you. The other thing that we do, and we do really well as a course team, and it's recognised by the university that we do this well, is our utilisation of guest speakers, particularly on these optional modules. As a team, we've got quite a wide network of connections because we've all worked professionally as guidance practitioners, and we all still have those professional connections through our professional bodies, which we'll talk about in a second. So we do utilize guest speakers quite extensively, and what we do, if we think a guest speaker, the guest speakers tend to be aligned to a particular module, but sometimes we think, well, actually, this might be useful for everybody to listen to. So yes, we've got somebody coming to talk for the higher education in context module, but actually it's more of a labour market bit, and that you might be focusing on graduate labour market, but this is going to be really useful for all students, no matter what module you've chosen. And we will invite the entire course and some of our other courses that we teach on as well, to come along and listen. So there's always those opportunities to have access to guest speakers. Bob, who's not here today, his philosophy is generally like, I can talk to you about the research, or I can get the person who's done the research to come and talk to you about that research, and that seems to come across far better. So we do utilise that guest speaker network quite extensively. And talking of professional bodies and professional links, it's over to you now for your bit, Sue.
Thank you. So our course at Huddersfield is one of only 5 universities that's been officially accredited by the Career Development Institute, or CDI, as we more informally know them, as a QCD centre. So QCD is the qualification in career development. And what that basically means is that once you've completed and passed your course, you're eligible to be included on the CDI register of career development professionals. And again, that doesn't matter where you are in the world either. You can still be registered with the CDI and be internationally based. So while you're a student with us, you might find that joining the CDI as a student member useful. So you've got access to their resources and other additional training opportunities that they offer, like webinars, etc. But then additionally, all our students on either the PG DIP programme or the master's programme at Huddersfield have the option to gain the QCD, which is this formal recognition that you are qualified not just academically through your MA or your PG DIP programme, but as a professional career development practitioner too. So it really formally recognises your level of practice, that you're a competent practitioner. So our QCD status was reviewed and was re-awarded in May this year. So you can be sure that our course is meeting the current needs of the career development sector. And, feel free to find out a little bit more about the benefits of the QCD or becoming a student member of the CDI by just going to the CDI website. We are also linked with AGCAS, or we have AGCAS is another professional body that we ensure that our course meets their requirements for. before as well, in terms of being recognised as supporting the training of career development professionals, but they don't offer a QCD, a qualification, in the same way as the CDI does. So yeah, that's a little bit about our professional recognition as a course. And has that changed slide there for you? I think it has, hasn't it? Yeah. One of the things that comes across really strongly within our course is the approach that we take about helping you to gain both experience and insight into that professional practice. So we view work-based learning as a really essential part of your learning journey whilst on the course. And your placement and work-based learning experiences, they feed directly into your modules. So they have a direct link with your professional practice modules and your skills development modules, as they help you to build those key skills so that you can undertake that careers education or career guidance role with individuals or with groups. And your work-based learning experiences also feed into your other modules. So you might be asked to refer to your placements or your work-based learning experiences within some of those optional modules that we just talked about, because you're drawing on your experience of working or seeing what's happening in those placements, so that you can then reflect on it and make sense of it in a bit more detail. So this placement requirements, it also links directly with the QCD, so that qualification in career development. Like I say, that's awarded by the CDI, professionally recognises your competence as a career practitioner, and they're looking for a minimum of 210 hours placement or work-based learning, and that's what we expect within our course as well. So we're meeting those requirements just by engaging with the course. So we split it into two different types. There's placement and flexible work-based learning, and I'll just explain a little bit more about that as we go through. So like I say, a total of 210 hours, which is essentially 30 days placement or work-based learning activity over the duration of your training. So if you're doing it full-time, you'll hopefully get that within that 1 year full-time, or if you're 2-year part-time, over that 2 years. So we'd expect that you would have evidence of 20 days placement, and we're defining placement as being that it's undertaken in a structured, ideally supervised environment that employs fully qualified career development professionals. Gosh, that felt like a bit of a tongue twister then. Ideally, you'd need a named supervisor, and you'd meet with them regularly, and they'll be able to hopefully complete a placement report for you at the end of that. However, we also know that we've got many students who either work in a school where they are the sole practitioner. There's no other practitioners. There's no line manager with, careers qualifications or anything like that. And similarly, we know for our international students that quite often they're the only one who is undertaking this kind of qualification and haven't necessarily got that supervisory capacity within their placements. So you can use your place of work as your placements. That's absolutely fine. And what we try to do is, if you are in that position as a sole practitioner or there isn't anybody else, we try and link you up with somebody else who's in a similar situation, who we know has been through the course and can maybe offer you some kind of mentorship or supervision in that sense. But they're the kind of things that we talk through with you at the beginning of the course. I offer everybody a placement meeting so we can just talk about what your personal requirements are as a student to help you to meet the requirements of the course. We also expect a further 10 days of work-based learning or flexible work-based learning, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. And within your placement or work-based learning, you should have opportunities to not only observe practice, which is ideal, but also to develop your own practice through undertaking one-to-one career conversations and facilitating career focused group work sessions. So we'd hope that you'd have opportunities to not just observe, but actually get stuck in and do stuff. If you're already working in a careers role and careers capacity, that might not be a problem for you at all. But if you're completely new to the sector, then this is a fantastic opportunity for you to begin to start building your skills and experience. So to pass your one-to-one skills module, effective careers conversations that I mentioned before, you need to undertake a minimum of 3 one-to-one guidance interactions that have been assessed as competent, and those will normally take place within your placement. Sometimes they don't, and we can work around that. So there are exceptions. This is kind of like, this is the general idea of what we'd like, but we always know that there's potential exceptions, and we do work around that as best as we can. And if we haven't managed to lose anybody completely because we've not been able to accommodate their situation. If you want the QCD, you have to also, in addition to those 3 assessed one-to-ones, you need to provide evidence of a further 3 one-to-ones. So you've got a total of 6. Now, those additional 3 don't necessarily need to be assessed. But yeah, we can talk about that and give you more detail about that as and when it becomes appropriate. Don't want to overload you too much. And then the assess group work activity that you engage in for the facilitating careers focused group work module, that meets the QCD requirements of 2 assess group work sessions. So you've already got that one ticked off, so you don't need to do anything extra then. So in terms of evidencing your placements or flexible work-based learning activity, we just ask you to keep a log of it. Dates, location, description of the activity that you engaged with, and we give you a template to help you to track all of your placements and work-based learning hours. So hopefully we make that fairly easy for you. So thinking about placement specifically, there's loads of different options for you to consider. Like I said, you can use your existing employment if you're currently employed in a careers capacity. You can potentially use your existing employer if you're in a role that isn't directly related careers in a different department, but the organisation has a careers focus at some point. Then you can maybe use your place of work, but go in sort of like get experience in a different department, and you can use all that towards your hours and days that you need to provide evidence of. You can find your own placements. So consider using your own networks or making speculative inquiries to local providers, schools, colleges, universities, adult providers, prisons, etc., etc. Anywhere that offers career guidance, education, information, get in touch with them. See what opportunities might be available for you to engage with, and they might be able to offer you a formal placement. And I would say anything over 5 days is probably formal placement, or it might be something informal, which less than 5 days, and that could count towards your flexible work-based learning. Formal placement experience should give you, like I say, that opportunity to observe where you can. But again, if you're the sole practitioner in your organisation, then it's difficult to observe other people because there aren't any. We actually have a range of resources so that you can observe practice in different ways. And we're also supporting students internationally by having some of our flexible work-based learning opportunities of being in a virtual space. So, for example, one of our recent graduates works in at Cambridge University, and she's offered it within the career service there, and she's offered the opportunity for some of our students who are finding it difficult to observe other practitioners to observe some of her one-to-one guidance appointments that she conducts over Teams, for example. So we've got ways and means of doing things, so don't feel like, oh, this is just not something that can happen within your setting. We can be pretty creative about how we make it happen for you. You can have multiple placements, and I'd actually really, really encourage you to do that, because the experience of a wide range of sectors can be really useful to broaden your understanding of the needs of different clients and can enhance your practice. If you're already working in a particular setting, go and see what it's like in a different setting. You might learn something that you can bring back to your setting as well. Multiple placements gives you a real opportunity to test out different sectors and get a feel for how they differ and for what you prefer. So I'd really, really encourage that. I find that students who do have multiple placements tend to get a lot out of the course. And we can support you in finding a placement. Jodie alluded to the fact that we've got a really good network amongst the team, and we frequently share opportunities from placement providers that we've already got established links with. So I would recommend that rather than just go in and contacting lots of different universities yourself, because if they get lots of inquiries from lots of students, that might just feel a bit overwhelming. Come via us. And if we've already got connections, we can help sort of like funnel that connection to the right person in that particular service. And it also just cuts down on the workload for the placement provider. If we haven't got any connections, we'll be upfront about that, and we'll either try and make some connections in the first instance, or we'll just say, yeah, crack on and get in contact yourself. But I would definitely recommend having a conversation with us first to see if there's any connections that we can support you with. Okay, so that flexible work-based learning that I mentioned, so it's going to give you a little bit more information. But like I said, alongside that formal placement, you are expected to engage with other less formal work-based learning activity. And it could be any of these things on the screen and more. I'm not going to read all of those things out on there, but I hope you can get the sense that, there's all sorts of things that you can do. They could be just one-off opportunities, a day here, an insight day, a 1-hour webinar, whatever it might be, but range of different things that can all go towards you building up that 10 days flexible work-based learning. So I think that's all from me. I can see there's quite a few questions in the questions in the chat there. Can placements be in your place of work or externally? Hopefully we answered that one, and they can be. APEL, I'm thinking, yeah, you've answered that one already. I was going to say, oh, that's not an easy one to answer.
I think the only bit I didn't quite answer was whether you do placement on the PG DIP and the MA. Yeah, so essentially the best way to think about this qualification is everybody does the PG DIP. Everybody does the same modules, unless you including the optional modules, and the placement requirements and the professional practice requirements. The only difference is the MA students do a dissertation. So they do those 2 dissertation modules. So yes, you are expected to do a placement regardless of whether you are on the MA or the PG DIP, or whether you're part-time or full-time. It depends on how long you've got to do your placement then.
Yeah.
And I think the DBS one, I just said, if you needed, correct me if I've got this, it's the only reason we would ask for a DBS if you were wanting to do a placement in a school in the UK. If you've already got a placement or you're using your own employer, we tend not to ask for a DBS check, just because we don't want to be DBSing people unnecessarily. The DBS don't like that, and the university doesn't like that. But usually, if you need a DBS, we've identified that as part of your application. Yes. So Hayley, your question about can you top up from PG DIP to MA later? Yes, you can. There are sometimes time limits on that. However, we can be a little bit flexible with those time limits. Particularly if you've continued to work in the sector. So if you have evidence that you've done your PG DIP and then a number of years later you want to top up to the MA, providing, if it's outside of the timeline, which is usually around kind of 3 to 5 years, because the university will expect the learning to be current. But if you've got evidence that you've continued to work in the sector, we can use that. And I've managed to get people who completed their PG DIP quite a significant number of years ago, allowing them to top up. So yes. And yeah, the MA do the whole program timeline that you showed in the, yes. Yeah. So yeah, that the timeline that we showed was the MA. Like I said, the only difference is the PG DIP students don't do those dissertation modules. And that's all sorted for you. This is also something I always say to students as well. You don't need to worry about that. Essentially, you just get enrolled on the modules that are relevant to you. So if you are a full-time PG DIP student, you just get enrolled on the full-time PG DIP modules. The same if you're MA or part-time. So don't worry too much about that. I'm just going to show, so keep the questions coming. We do just have a short video to show, which is a previous graduate of ours who is now working as a careers consultant at the university, and he just gives an insight into studying. Hopefully we've tested this and the sound worked, and I remembered to share my sound when I did my sharing, but please let me know if there are any problems. I've got my eye on the chat. So I can see a few questions coming through, and I know that Sue's just addressed a couple of them. So in terms of the intakes, we do have 3 intakes. The January and May intake are for distance learners, and the September intake is a blended program. So that is our program where you would be expected to actually attend sessions and lectures in Huddersfield. So if you are interested in the distance learning, we have the May and the January starts, and September is for the blended. In terms of the level 6, I can see that Sue has responded to that. So yeah, we do get a lot of people on the course who have already completed the level 6, and that is a really common question that people worry, is this is repetitive. There will be some similar content, but what the students tell us is that we are building on that content. So it would be equivalent to you having done a degree and then a master's afterwards. So we go into more detail and actually do study a broader range of topics as well. But so we do accept that level 6 as an entry qualification onto the course, rather than feeling that it's a repetition of what you've done before. And we do that, like Sue said, it's quite common for us to have people who ask that question and come on to us having done a level 6. And the question about the PG dip, that's a good question. And the reason sometimes it's quite useful for us to explain as to why we offer both the MA and the PG dip. I did kind of allude to one of the reasons earlier. The PG dip, so the postgraduate diploma, is generally accepted as the qualification, the postgraduate qualification, the level 7 qualification in career development. So a lot of us, so when I did the course, I did the PG dip, and that was all that was on offer at the time. The MA wasn't an option. We offer the MA for a couple of reasons. So one of the reasons is actually people do like doing research. So, you know, actually being able to offer a program that allows you to get that postgraduate diploma qualification of 120 credits, but also do some independent research into a topic that you are particularly interested in. So there's always people who want to do that MA, kind of want to get that level of qualification. The other reason we offer the MA and the PG dip is due to funding. So if you are self-funding and based in the UK, you know, you are eligible, you may be eligible for a postgraduate loan. The course, the MA, is eligible for a postgraduate loan. student loans company do not offer postgraduate loans for anything below an MA, so they don't offer a PG loan for the postgraduate diploma, for example. So it allows the course to be accessible to a wider group of people because they can access the postgraduate funding. So we do have a mix of MA and PG DIP students, because as I've mentioned earlier, some people are either self-funding and not eligible for a loan, so they will go for the PG DIP because that's the qualification they need. Their employer might be paying for it. I know their employer only wants the PG DIP. I say only, that sounds like I'm really minimizing it, and that's not the case, but they will require the PG DIP rather than the MA. So that's a little bit of history, I think sometimes just is useful for people to understand. So just a couple of final points from us around why choosing to study this qualification at Huddersfield. We are one of the only specialist universities that specialises in higher education, and we're certainly the only one that offers the QCD and allows you to specialise in higher education and has that specialist higher education module. So that is quite unique to us. In fact, we are the only university that has the pathway option, so it actually allows you to specialise in working in schools and colleges or working in higher education. You know, we quite unique in that sense. Our employability rates are excellent. This is partly reflected by the fact that there is a skill shortage in the sector, and that, you know, organisations are talking to us about the you know, not being able to fulfill vacancies. One of the things that we often find is students find employment partway through the program. A lot of employers will find being enrolled on a course like this is sufficient enough to get you into the sector, and they will support you then to continue that qualification. That has happened to a number of our students. For anyone who is thinking about the in-person program, the blended course, we're the only provider in the north of England that offers a level 7 qualification in career development. There's not many of us around, which is one of the reasons we've developed our distance learning program, is to allow us to have that wider geographical reach and to allow people to access this qualification. And as I've mentioned already, around there being a UK-wide, and actually not UK-wide, it's a global shortage. I do speak to people. I have an international role at the university, and I do speak to people internationally who are finding that it's not just in the UK that we have a skills shortage. So we've mentioned this a number of times, but just to finally and right on time is our intake. So our next intake is January 2025. We are still taking applications. So if you are interested in starting with us, you'd be joining a really good group of students that have already accepted offers, and joining those that are already on the programme who started with us last January and in May. If January is a little bit too soon for you, we have our next intake in May. And for those that are wanting an in-person experience, that should say September 2025. And we do offer the MA, the PG DIP, the full-time and part-time options. Thank you very much for engaging today and asking us loads of questions. It's absolutely fantastic. Feel free to keep asking us questions. We can still access the chat even when we've finished the webinar. So even when we stop sharing and we go off the call, we can still see the chat. So feel free to ask some questions there. But my email address is on the screen there, should you want to email me directly with any questions. So I am just going to have a look at some of these questions and find out if there's anything you want to add just as we are bringing this to a close. And yeah, so it's apply directly. Dan, I can see that Megan has responded to that, and she's put Carolyn's put the applications in there. So I can see people just saying thank you very much. So thank you again. Thank you, Sue, for joining me. It's always nice when it's not just me just talking. But yes, feel free to use the chat or drop us an email, and thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Check with